They say your body is your temple. Mine became a timeshare. My name is Cassie Robinson, and I'm 26 years old. I work as a librarian in a quiet town called Ashwood Falls, where nothing extraordinary ever happens. Or at least, that's what I thought until 3 months ago, when I woke up with mud under my fingernails, leaves in my hair, and absolutely no memory of how I'd gotten to the edge of Blackthorn Forest in the middle of the night. That was my first clue that my life was about to become very, very complicated. Started on a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays are new release days at the library, and I'd been excited about cataloging a collection of rare Victorian novels that had been donated by the Thornwell estate. The Thornwells were old money in Ashwood Falls, the kind of family whose name appeared on hospital wings and university buildings. When the last surviving member, Margaret Thornwell, passed away at 93, her entire library came to us. I stayed late that evening, carefully examining each volume. The books smelled of aged leather and vanilla, that particular scent that only comes from paper slowly surrendering to time. I was holding a first edition of Carmilla when I felt it, a strange tingling sensation at the base of my skull, like static electricity dancing across my nerves. The library lights flickered. I told myself it was just the old wiring. Ashwood Falls Library was built in 1887, and despite renovations, it still had its quirks. But then I felt something else. Presence. Not threatening exactly, but undeniably there. Like someone standing just behind you in a room you know is empty. "Hello," I called out, my voice echoing through the empty stacks. Nothing. Just the hum of the ancient heating system and the tick of the grandfather clock by the circulation desk. I shook off the feeling and continued working. By the time I locked up and walked to my car, the sun had set completely. Ashwood Falls doesn't have much in the way of street lighting. The town council always claimed it preserved our historic charm, so the walk through the parking lot was darker than usual. That's when everything went black. Not gradually, not like fainting. One moment I was reaching for my car door, and the next, nothing. Void. An absence so complete it felt like being erased. When I came back, and that's the only way I can describe it, coming back, I was standing at the edge of Blackthorn Forest, 3 miles from the library. My feet were bare. My shoes were nowhere to be found. And there was a voice in my head that definitely wasn't mine. "I apologize for the abrupt intrusion," it said, smooth and formal, with an accent I couldn't quite place. British maybe, but older. I seemed to have made rather a mess of things. I did what any rational person would do. I screamed. "Please don't do that," the voice said, sounding pained. "We share the same auditory system now. Your scream is quite literally giving me a headache. Who are you? What's happening? Am I having a stroke?" The words tumbled out in a panic. "You are not having a stroke. You are, however, currently hosting me. My name is Eldrick Morvain, and I am what you might call incorporeal. Incorporeal. Without a body of my own, yes." I laughed. Came out high and hysterical. "Right, course. 'Cause that makes perfect sense. I'm talking to myself in a forest at night because a ghost has taken up residence in my head." "Not a ghost," the voice, Eldrick, corrected. "A vampire. Or rather, what remains of one." That's when I fainted. Actually fainted this time. I woke up in my own bed, which was both comforting and deeply disturbing since I had no memory of getting there. Morning light streamed through my bedroom window. My alarm clock read 6:47 a.m. For a blessed moment, I thought it had all been a bizarre dream brought on by too much coffee and too many Gothic novels. Then I tried to get out of bed, and my body didn't respond. Panic seized me. Was I paralyzed? Had I injured myself during my blackout? I focused every ounce of willpower on moving my right hand, and finally my fingers twitched. "Ah, you're awake," Eldrick's voice said. "I was wondering when you'd return. You've been rather deeply asleep." The panic crystallized into anger. "Get body. I wish I could. Truly. This is as unwelcome for me as it is for you." He sounded genuinely apologetic. "I've been attempting to disengage since you lost consciousness, but it seems we're stuck." Stuck. The mechanics are complex, but essentially when you fainted while holding that book, Carmilla, I believe something happened. The book contained a fragment of my essence, bound there by a rather vindictive witch in 1889. Your touch combined with your, let's call it psychic sensitivity, created a bridge. I was drawn into you. I forced myself to sit up. It felt like moving through honey, every action requiring twice the normal effort. This is insane. Undoubtedly. But it's also happening. Oz, I can feel you fighting me for control. That's not going to work. We're going to need to cooperate. Cooperate. You hijacked my body. And you are currently crushing my consciousness with your panic. Neither of us is comfortable right now. His voice softened. Please. I know this is frightening. But if we're to figure out how to separate, we need to work together. I took a deep breath. Then another. Fine. Hey. Let's say I believe you, and I'm not saying I do. What happens now? Now, Eldrick said, we establish some ground rules. Over the next hour, as I got ready for work with Eldrick as a constant presence in my mind, we hammered out a basic arrangement. During daylight hours, I had full control of my body. Eldrick would remain what he called dormant, aware but not active, like a passenger rather than a driver. After sunset, however, things changed. I am still a vampire in essence, Eldrick explained as I brushed my teeth. Even without a physical form, I am bound by certain fundamental rules. During the day, I am diminished, weak. But after dark, I become stronger, much stronger. And I will need to take control, at least partially. Absolutely not. I spat toothpaste into the sink with more force than necessary. It's not a matter of choice, I'm afraid. Last night, when the sun set, my nature reasserted itself. That's why you experienced the blackout. I wasn't trying to take over. It simply happened. If we don't establish a protocol, the same thing will occur tonight. So what, you just steal my body every night? Sharing would be more accurate. And we can negotiate terms. Which is how I ended up standing in front of my bathroom mirror, making a deal with a vampire in my head about custody of my own body. The rules were simple. During the day, I was in charge. After sunset, we would share control, with Eldrick having primary authority for feeding purposes, which he assured me no longer required human blood. Apparently, centuries of evolution, or curse adaptation as he called it, meant he could sustain himself on animal blood or even certain types of energy. Think of it like shared custody, Eldrick suggested. You get weekdays, I get nights. We'll coordinate on weekends. That's not how custody works. I'm improvising. I've never possessed anyone before. Despite everything, I almost laughed. Wonderful. I'm your first. Indeed. Try to be gentle with me. The first week was hell. I called in sick to work, which I hated doing because I'd never been sick a day in my life, and spent the time trying to understand what had happened to me. Eldrick was surprisingly helpful, providing details about his existence, his transformation into a vampire in 1654, and his eventual binding into the book by a witch named Morgana Ashworth, who'd taken offense to his refusal of her romantic advances. She was quite persistent, Eldrick said as I researched historical records on my laptop. And vindictive. When I made it clear I had no interest, she decided if she couldn't have me, no one would. The binding spell was meant to trap me for eternity. But I freed you. Not exactly. You created a new prison. No offense intended. None taken. I'm thrilled to be a supernatural jail cell. We developed a rhythm. During the day, Eldrick remained quiet, occasionally offering commentary on my choices. Do you really need a third cup of coffee? Yes, Eldrick, I do. But generally staying out of the way. I could feel him there, a warm presence tucked into the back of my consciousness, but he was true to his word about not interfering. Sunset was different. The first time I felt the shift happen consciously. Now that I knew what to expect, it was like watching a tide come in. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I felt Eldrick surge forward in my mind. Not violently but powerfully. My senses sharpened. Colors became more vivid. I could hear my neighbor's television 3 houses down. The smell of jasmine from the garden outside filled my lungs like perfume. "This is what the world is like for you?" I asked, marveling at the sensory richness. "Every night," Eldrick confirmed. "One of the few benefits of vampirism. Shall we go for a walk? I've been confined to that book for over a century. I'd very much like to see the world again." We compromised. He could direct our body during walks, exploration, and feeding, but I maintained veto power over any decisions. If I said no, we didn't do it. That first night, we walked through Ashwood Falls under the stars, and Eldrick told me about the town as it had been in his time. The library had been a church. Main Street had been a dirt road. The forest had been twice as large, wild and full of wolves. "It's strange," he said softly, speaking through my lips, "to be here again, to see how much has changed, how much has been lost. Do you miss it? Your old life?" Long pause. "I miss having a body of my own. I miss the weight of existence, the autonomy of choice. But my old life." Another pause. "That life ended when I became a vampire. I'd already lost what mattered long before Morgana bound me." I wanted to ask what he'd lost, but something in his tone told me not to push. We walked in companionable silence, and I realized with surprise that I was almost enjoying this. The night was beautiful through vampire senses, and Eldrick was proving to be better company than I'd expected. When we returned home, Eldrick relinquished control smoothly, fading back into dormancy as I prepared for bed. "Thank you," he said quietly as I drifted off to sleep, "for trusting me tonight." "Don't make me regret it," I murmured. "I'll endeavor not to." By the second week, we'd settled into an almost normal routine. I went to work during the day, did my job, came home. After sunset, Eldrick would emerge, and we'd spend the evening together, walking, talking, sometimes just existing in comfortable quiet. I learned things about him. He'd been a scholar before his transformation, studying philosophy and theology at Cambridge. He'd been turned by a vampire named Isadora during a research trip to Eastern Europe, not violently but as a gift he hadn't asked for and initially didn't want. "She thought she was saving me," Eldrick explained one night as we sat by Ashwood Creek, listening to the water. "I was dying of consumption. She offered me eternity. I was too weak to refuse, and by the time I recovered, the transformation was complete." "Did you love her?" "I thought I did. For a while. But love built on desperation and debt isn't really love, is it? It's gratitude wearing a mask." I understood that more than I wanted to admit. He learned things about me too. About my quiet life, my love of books, my tendency to avoid emotional connection because it felt safer to live in stories than to risk writing my own. "You're afraid," he observed one evening. "Of what?" "Of living. Truly living. You've built a lovely little existence here, Cassie, but it's only half a life." I wanted to argue, but he wasn't wrong. I'd spent years telling myself I was content, but contentment and happiness aren't the same thing. The complications started when my best friend, Maya Chen, noticed I was acting differently. Maya was a nurse at Ashwood Falls General Hospital, practical and perceptive in equal measure. We'd been friends since college, and she knew me well enough to spot when something was off. "You've been weird lately," she said over lunch at Rosie's diner. "Good weird, but weird. You're more confident. You laugh more. And last night I saw you walking through downtown at midnight like you owned the place." I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. "You saw me?" "Yeah, I was coming off a double shift." "Look, I don't know, different. Powerful, almost. What's going on?" In my head, Eldrick stirred, curious. "Nothing's going on. I've just been trying to get out more. Enjoy life." Not technically a lie. Maya studied me with those sharp eyes that had probably diagnosed 1,000 patients. "Cassie, we've been friends for 8 years. I know when you're hiding something." "I'm not." "Is it a guy? Because honestly, if you've finally met someone, I'm thrilled. You deserve happiness." Eldrick's amusement rippled through me. She thinks we're romantically involved. We are not romantically involved, I hissed internally. I'm aware. But the assumption is rather flattering, don't you think? I kicked him mentally, which achieved nothing but made me feel better. It's not a guy, I told Maya. I promise. I'm just figuring some things out. She looked skeptical but let it drop. Okay. But if you need to talk, I'm here. Always. After she left, Eldrick spoke up. She cares about you deeply. I know. You should tell her the truth. That I'm possessed by a 400-year-old vampire. Sure, that'll go over well. She might surprise you. But I wasn't ready for that conversation. Not yet. The third week brought our first real crisis. I'd noticed Eldrick growing restless during the evenings. His presence felt heavier, more agitated. When I asked about it, he was evasive. It's nothing. Don't concern yourself. We share a body, Eldrick. Your problems are literally my problems. He sighed or did whatever the mental equivalent was. I'm hungry. Properly hungry. The energy I've been sustaining myself on isn't sufficient. I need blood. The word sent a chill through me. You said you didn't need human blood. I don't. Animal blood will suffice. But I do need something more substantial than the ambient life energy I've been siphoning from our surroundings. So what do? We hunt. That night, for the first time, I felt real fear about our arrangement. Eldrick took control after sunset, and we went into Blackthorn Forest. His movements were different, predatory, focused. Every sense heightened to an almost painful degree. We tracked a deer through the undergrowth, moving with impossible silence. When we found it, Eldrick paused. I need you to trust me, he said. And I need you to understand this is what I am. This is the nature I cannot escape. I understand. What happened next was simultaneously horrifying and beautiful. Eldrick was swift, precise. The deer barely suffered. And afterward, as he fed, I felt his relief wash through both of us like cool water on a burn. Thank you, he whispered when it was done. For not fighting me. For understanding. We buried the deer respectfully, and as we walked home, I realized something had shifted between us. This wasn't just coexistence anymore. We were becoming partners in something I couldn't quite name. The fourth week brought intimacy I hadn't expected. Not physical, obviously that would have been complicated, but emotional. When you share a body with someone, you can't hide. There are no secrets, no walls. Eldrick felt my anxiety when I dealt with difficult patrons at the library. I felt his loneliness, centuries deep, an ache he'd carried so long he'd almost stopped noticing it. We talked about everything. Philosophy, literature, music. He was delighted by modern technology. You can access the sum of human knowledge from a device in your pocket? Extraordinary. And horrified by modern politics. Some things never change, I see. I found myself looking forward to sunset. To his voice, his perspective, his dry wit. During the day, I caught myself thinking, I should tell Eldrick about this, when something interesting happened. Maya noticed. Okay, seriously, what is going on with you? She demanded one afternoon at the library. You're glowing. You smile at random times. Yesterday I caught you laughing at nothing. I was remembering something funny, I defended. Something funny from the guy you're definitely seeing. Eldrick's amusement filled me. She's persistent. Fine. I threw up my hands. Yes, there's someone. It's complicated. Maya grinned triumphantly. I knew it. Tell me everything. What's his name? What does he do? How did you meet? His name is Eldrick. He's a historian. We met through the Thornwell collection. All technically true. Eldrick. That's unique. Like it. When do I get to meet him? Probably never, Eldrick murmured in my mind. He's very private, I said aloud. And we're taking things slow. Slow is good. Just promise me you're happy. I considered the question. Was I happy? A month ago I would have said I was content. Now, with a vampire living in my head, my life upended, everything I thought I knew called into question. Yes, strangely, impossibly, I was happy. I'm happy, I told her. And I meant it. The shift happened so gradually I almost didn't notice it. It was the little things. The way Eldrick made sure I remembered to eat breakfast. The way I stayed up late so he could have more time experiencing the world. The way we finished each other's sentences, thought in harmony, moved through space like two halves of a whole. The way I started to miss him during the day. This is dangerous, I told him one night as we sat on my apartment balcony, watching the stars. What is this? Getting too comfortable. Too close. Would that be so terrible? Eldrick, we're not going to be like this forever. We're looking for a way to separate, remember? What happens when we find it? Silence. Long and heavy. I suppose we'd say goodbye, he said finally. Exactly. So maybe we should maintain some boundaries. Perhaps you're right. But he sounded sad, and that sadness echoed in me. The problem was I didn't want boundaries anymore. Somewhere between the fear and the frustration and the forced intimacy, I'd started to care about him, really care, in ways that went beyond sympathy or friendship. I was falling for the vampire in my head, and that was a problem, because Eldrick was falling too. I felt it in the way he lingered before releasing control each morning, in the gentleness of his presence, like a hand almost but not quite touching mine, in the way he said my name, soft and reverent like a prayer. Cassie, he said one night, his voice vulnerable in a way I'd never heard. I need to tell you something. What is it? In all my centuries of existence, I have never felt as alive as I do with you. That terrifies me. Our heart raced. Eldrick, I know this is impossible. I know I'm nothing but a ghost wearing your skin. But He stopped, words failing. You what? I believe I'm falling in love with you. The confession hung between us, enormous and impossible. That's insane, I whispered. Completely. We don't even know if you can feel love. If what you're feeling is real or just proximity. I know what I feel, Cassie. I've had centuries to understand my own heart. This is real. Closed my eyes. Tears leaked from under my lids. I feel it too. God help me, I feel it too. Then perhaps this isn't as impossible as we think. How? How could this possibly work? You don't have a body. Can't kiss you, hold you, see you. And even if we figured all that out, what happens when we find a way to separate? What then? I don't know. His voice was raw with honesty. But I know I don't want to lose you. Not yet. Maybe not ever. We sat in the darkness, two consciousnesses in one body, falling in love in the most complicated way imaginable. The answer came from an unexpected source. I was cataloging more books from the Thornwell estate when I found it. A journal tucked inside a hollowed-out volume of Shakespeare's sonnets. The journal belonged to Morgana Ashworth, the witch who'd bound Eldrick in the first place. That's impossible, Eldrick breathed as I opened it. She would have destroyed this. Witches don't leave their grimoires lying about. But apparently Morgana had. And inside were detailed notes about her binding spell, including how to reverse it. There's a ritual, I read aloud, scanning the old-fashioned script. It requires a blood offering, a full moon, and... Stop. And what? And a willing sacrifice. Someone to anchor you, to give you form. A body to call your own. What kind of body? I read further, my excitement building. Doesn't have to be human. The spell can bind you to any living form. A wolf, a bird, even a tree. But it says the form must be freely given. Where would we find something willing to give up its body? Thought hard. Then I remembered something Maya had mentioned. The hospital was doing a medical study involving brain-dead patients, kept alive by machines, their families unable to let go. What if we could find a body that's already empty? Someone who's brain-dead but physically intact. Eldrick fell silent, considering. That would be ethically complex. But possible. Perhaps. If the family consented. if we could present it as organ donation of a sort. Took 3 weeks to arrange. 3 weeks of careful conversations with Maya, who I finally told the truth to. To her credit, she believed me immediately. I knew something weird was going on, she said, surprisingly calm about the whole vampire situation. I just thought it was drugs or a cult. This is actually better. She helped us find a candidate, a 32-year-old man named James Moretti who'd been in a car accident. His family had been keeping him on life support for 6 months, unable to accept that he was gone. When Maya explained that they could donate his body to medical research that might help others, they agreed. The ritual took place during the next full moon. We gathered in the hospital's basement chapel. Maya, me, and a witch named Celine that Maya knew through her cousin. Morgana's journal provided the instructions, and Celine helped translate the archaic magical language. The spell was complex, requiring precision and power. I felt Eldrick's nervousness matching my own as Celine began the incantation. The air grew thick with energy, crackling like a storm about to break. When Celine cut my palm and pressed it to James Moretti's hand, I felt Eldrick pull away from me. The separation was agony, not physical pain but something deeper, like part of my soul was being torn away. "Eldrick!" gasped. "I'm here," he said, but his voice was distant, fading. Light exploded through the room, blinding and cold. I felt Eldrick slip free completely, felt the vast emptiness where he'd been. For a terrible moment, I thought we'd lost him. Then James Moretti's body gasped, back arching. His eyes flew open, and they were Eldrick's eyes. Ancient and knowing and full of wonder. "Cassie," he said. His voice strange coming from different lips, but unmistakably him. I was crying. "You're here. You're really here." He looked down at his hands. His own hands, and laughed. The sound was pure joy. The adjustment was strange. Eldrick had to learn to be physical again. Motor control, hunger, fatigue. Sensations he'd been removed from for over a century. He fell down a lot those first few days. His new body not quite responding the way he expected. "I'd forgotten how exhausting being corporeal is," he complained after tripping over his own feet for the 3rd time. I helped him relearn everything. How to eat. Food tasted different than he remembered. How to navigate social situations. Modern etiquette was confusing. How to simply exist in a body that was his alone. But the best part, I could finally see him. James Moretti had been handsome. Dark hair, strong features, athletic build. But when Eldrick inhabited that body, it transformed. He moved with centuries of grace. His expressions held depth that defied the youth of his face. And when he smiled at me, really smiled with his whole face, I fell in love all over again. We had to fabricate a cover story. Eldrick became Edward Moretti, James's distant cousin from England, who'd arrived to settle the estate. Maya helped create documents, and Celine used magic to smooth over the bureaucratic details. Within a month, Eldrick, Edward, had integrated into Ashwood Falls. He got a job at the university as a visiting professor of medieval history. He found an apartment near mine, and we began dating properly like normal people. Except nothing about us was normal. Our first kiss happened on my balcony, under the same stars we'd watched together when we shared a body. Eldrick cupped my face with hands that were finally his own, and when his lips met mine, I tasted freedom and possibility and love so deep it ached. "I've wanted to do that for so long," he murmured against my mouth. "You could have mentioned it," I teased. "Some things are worth waiting for." 6 months later, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror in my apartment, and the face looking back at me was only mine. Felt strange sometimes, being alone in my own head. I'd grown so accustomed to Eldrick's presence that the silence felt empty. But then I'd hear his key in the lock, see him walk through the door with groceries and a smile, and I'd remember, this was better. This was real. We had challenges. Eldrick was still technically a vampire, which meant he needed blood occasionally and couldn't go out in direct sunlight without getting severely burned. But synthetic blood worked fine, and sunscreen plus careful planning managed the rest. Maya became one of our closest friends, delighting in being in on the secret. "You two are the weirdest couple I know," she'd say. "And I work in an emergency room. That's saying something." The Thornwell estate was fully catalogued. The library thrived. Ashwood Falls remained quiet and small and perfect. And Eldrick and I built a life together that was ours alone. 1 year after the ritual, he proposed. We were back at Ashwood Creek, the place where we'd shared so many nighttime conversations when we'd been two minds in one body. Eldrick knelt in the grass, a ring in his hand. Sapphire because he said it matched my eyes. "Cassie Robinson," he said, "you gave me back my life, my body, my freedom. You gave me love when I thought I'd forgotten how to feel it. Will you give me one more thing? Will you give me forever?" I didn't hesitate. Yes. 1,000 times yes. We were married in autumn, in the chapel where the ritual had taken place. Maya was my maid of honor. Celine officiated. And as I looked into Eldrick's eyes and said my vows, I thought about how strange fate was. A month ago, I'd been a quiet librarian living half a life. Then a vampire moved into my head, and everything changed. He'd been my prisoner, then my partner, then my impossible love. And now he was my husband. "What are you thinking?" Eldrick asked as we danced at our reception, held in the library after hours among the books that had brought us together. "I'm thinking that I spent so much time living in stories. I almost missed having one of my own." He smiled, that centuries-old soul shining through young eyes. "And what a story it is. It's not over yet." "No," he agreed. "It's only just beginning." We danced until midnight, surrounded by books and friends and love. And when the clock struck 12, Eldrick pulled me close and whispered in my ear, "Thank you, Cassie, for everything, for trusting me, for loving me, for giving me back the world." I kissed him, pouring every ounce of emotion I had into it. "Thank you for reminding me how to live." Epilogue. 3 years later. The Ashwood Falls Library now has a new wing. The Morvain Robinson collection of supernatural literature, funded by a generous anonymous donation, thanks to some very old vampire gold Eldrick had stashed away centuries ago, houses rare books on mythology, folklore, and the occult. Eldrick curates it personally, bringing his centuries of knowledge to bear. I'm the head librarian now. And every evening when the sun sets and the last patrons leave, Eldrick and I walk through the stacks together, just talking. Sometimes about books, sometimes about life, sometimes about nothing at all. He still needs blood occasionally. I still have moments where I miss the intimacy of sharing thoughts without words. But we've built something better. A partnership chosen rather than forced. Love earned through understanding and compromise and trust. Maya visits often, usually bringing wine and stories from the hospital that make us grateful for our relatively quiet lives. Celine checks in periodically, making sure the binding spell remains stable. And Ashwood Falls continues to be the small, strange town where impossible things sometimes happen. At night before we sleep, Eldrick holds me close and I feel his heartbeat, a rhythm that was borrowed from death but returned to life. And I think about how lucky we are, how easily this could have gone differently, how we could have fought instead of cooperated, rejected instead of accepted, feared instead of loved. "What are you thinking about?" Eldrick asks, sensing my contemplation. "How we started as borrowed bodies and became permanent hearts." He kisses my forehead. "That's beautifully put. I've learned from the best." We fall asleep tangled together. Two separate people who'd once been one, now choosing every day to be together. It's not the story I expected, but it's the story I wouldn't trade for anything. After all, the best love stories are the ones you never see coming. The ones that possess you completely and never let go.